How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to talk about my run at the most recent regionals, which happened in Liverpool last weekend. It was the first EU regional since COVID. And I ended up placing 11th, so pretty solid run. I went 6-2, top 16, good CP, etc. So I'm just going to do a rundown of the team I used, the teams I played against, how the meta looks at the moment. There we go, we've got our first high YouTube in chat. So yeah, to start with the team I used, you can see at the top here. Can you see my cursor? You can't, you can see me highlight stuff. So yeah, this is the team I used. It's a pretty standard PALKIA team. There are a few variations of this floating around. Like there are variations where you go double redirection, so you'll see Indeedy on there. There are variations with, what was the other one I saw? I saw someone running Escavalier on this team. I wouldn't personally recommend that. But generally on this team you see PALKIA Calyrex as the mainstays. Obviously. PALKIA Calyrex, Incin and Mungus as the mainstays. And then P2 Aleki's a little bit flexible. I personally think that this is the best 6 to use with PALKIA Calyrex, at least that's been discovered so far. I'm sure some people may disagree, but I think there are issues with other variants, like the Indeedy variants are just a little bit too passive. Variants with that Aleki lack a fast mode, so if you get caught out of position, you're dead if you can't get Trick Room up, basically. There are Dusclops variations where you use Dusclops instead of P2 to try and set off a weakness policy on Calyrex, but then you get dunked on by like Life Orb with Eltal, you get killed by Calyrex Shadow, becomes very difficult to set Trick Room up. So I think this is the most solid set of 6. I also just really like P2. I've literally got a P2 emote in my Twitch chat. I love that duck. But I think P2 helps a lot with some pretty tricky matchups for this team, most notably like Solgaleo is difficult. Hey Big J, how's it going? Solgaleo is kind of difficult for this team just because with most physical attackers you can just bounce in and out. And just reset, intimidate parting shots, keep fake out pressure on the board and just slow them down. Whereas Solgaleo obviously is a bit of an issue because you can't intimidate it because of its ability, and also because it can stack special defense boosts, it means you really struggle to break through it if it stacks the right boosts. So I think it is very, very useful to have foul, like this particular P2 that I used had foul play. So it can tank a hit from +2 Solga and foul play it back. And suddenly the Solga is a bit less threatening. The other matchup that covers like big special attacking Dynamax Pokemon, notably Dialga, is a problem. Opposing Palkia can be a bit tricky. I'll go into it a bit more depth later, but I played a Palkia Calyrex Ice Mirror in my last round, and P2 ended up making a lot of difference in that one. Because Eerie Impulse lets you like tank hit and shut down those big special attackers, which otherwise, Instinct can't intimidate. And like Dialga, Life Orb Dialga can one-shot everything on this team, basically. Kind of the way the team operates is very much like it's kind of a mixed Trick Room team in that you do have a fast mode. It's not the strongest fast mode in the world, but like Aleki Palkia is pretty threatening. Like Palkia is reasonably fast, base 100 speed, so you can get some decent pace on it after an Electro Web. And that's your fast mode. You also have options like going kind of a Mungus Palkia and either opting for a Trick Room or just an early game Dynamax, just blasting through things. So it's very versatile. I think that's one of the key strengths of the teams, how versatile it is. The downside of that is that because it's so versatile, you have to be very careful with how you play it. The other downside is that because your offense is limited largely to Palkia and Calyrex, like Aleki is an offensive Pokemon, obviously it does decent damage, but it's got a lot of defensive checks, like anything that resists electric, basically. Like Palkia often comes as a lead, but if you let your Palkia go down, immediately your matchup into like Incineroar or into Zacian becomes so much harder just because like your only damage output there is Calyrex, and after an Intimidate you can't kill Incin very easily. You can't really deal with, like, you can't one-shot Zacian, and Zacian does a lot of damage back unless you get Intimidates down on it. Was it offensive P2? No, I ran defensive P2. I think this team tends to run defensive P2 with like Foul Play or Impulse. Like I said, the key matchups I was looking to cover were like Solgaleo with Foul Play and other kind of big physical attackers like that. Weakness policy setup is difficult for Trick Room because a lot of the time weakness policy setup users are very, very bulky. And then big special attackers, Dialga, Palkia, that kind of stuff. Having Eerie Impulse for those is useful. It also just gives you a really good late game engine because kind of leading on from the point I just made about losing your Palkia earlier, in the game, you often, like, if your opponent can stall out the early game with this team, a lot of the time it can be very difficult to reposition, which means your end game is very bad if you're caught out of position. P2 can solve that fairly well, because P2 is an absolute engine in the late game. Calyrex was good in the right matchups. Like, there are certain matchups where it's very difficult for Calyrex to shine, and obviously with the meta being run by Incinization, it can be difficult to position. Like, a lot of the time it comes in as in the back as a Trick Room Sweeper. You have to be very careful with how you play it. I think this is one of those teams where you often won't bring both your restricteds. Calyrex was usually the one that stayed on the side. But like for fast mode stuff, a lot of the time I'd end up bringing like Eleki, Palkia, Incin, and Mungus in some order, for example. Yeah, in the matchups where Calyrex was useful, like if you get that thing under Trick Room, it will rip through a team. Like a Glacial Lance is a broken move, and I don't know why they allowed it in the game. 130 base power, physical, ice move, spread move, no drawback. Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I was talking about earlier with the versatility. A lot of it comes down to how well you play Team Preview, which 4 Pokemon you bring in. Again, I will get to that later, but you can see kind of just at the start of this, I lost game 1 in the majority of my sets. But with a team like this, if you can adapt and figure out what your opponent's items are, what the threats are, how you can play around that, it becomes very, very good when you have that versatility to be able to play around that many different things. Yeah, basically, I thought the team was really good. I'm very, very... like, I'm not releasing a pace for it at the moment, just 'cause I'm very, very strongly considering bringing it to EUIC. I think it felt really nice to play. It suits my playstyle really well. So I think I'm probably going to stick with it. I may do some tweaks on it. I'll test it a bit more, that kind of stuff. But overall, the team felt really good. But I think it does, a lot of the time, come down to how confident you are in being able to basically adapt over a best of 3. Like, I don't think there was a single set that I played where I brought the same 4 Pokemon to every game. Whereas, like, a lot of teams... like, we've seen a lot recently, the kind of Whimsicott, Kyogre, Kartana team coming up against the Standard Sun core. And, like, every single game between those will be the same 4 Pokemon on both sides, with few exceptions. Like, the Rain team always brings Groudon, it pretty much always brings Zard, it brings Zacian, it brings Gastro into that matchup, and the Rain team will bring Kyogre, usually Grimmsnarl, Zacian, and Kartana. So it's kind of it's a lot more flexible, but it requires you to be a lot more flexible in how you use it, basically. Didn't get into like EUIC. Yeah, the way they dropped that was kind of crap. For anyone who doesn't know, basically EUIC, they didn't announce. They said they were going to announce when it went live, the registration. They didn't announce when it went live, and a load of people missed out because they didn't know. Like there was one guy, I can't remember who it was. I think it was someone who like top cut Liverpool. The tickets for EUIC went live when he was on his flight back from Liverpool, so obviously he couldn't get EUIC tickets, and now he's just stuck. And he can't go, which sucks. One more W would have top cut. Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of people on 6-2. I feel like I could have top cut. That's the thing with this team. I think, again, I'll get into it in a bit more detail later, but there are a couple of games that came down to like 1 or 2 little calls that could have gone a different way. Yeah, anyway, let's get on with analysing the games. So my memory of the games is a little shaky in places, but it's going to be just kind of a general overview. Oh, Pado, yeah, that was a big one. He won the last EUIC and didn't get to register for this one. Yeah, you're right. So yeah, round 1 I played a really weird team. Dialga was there. This was the start of my run of 4 consecutive Assault Vest Kyogres in my first 4 rounds. Spoiler alert. But yeah, the first time I played against Dialga, Kyogre, Landorus, Persian, Zapdos, and Amoonguss. I will say I lost game 1 in this, and my immediate thought was there is no shot I lose my first regionals run to a Persian in round 1. Yeah, Persian is one of those Pokemon that is kind of tricky to play around if you don't know what the set is. Because obviously Persian can only have 4 moves, but when you're playing against it, you kind of have to play around. Like, it's almost certainly going to have Fake Out, right? It'll probably have an offensive move of some description. But you have to play around like Fake Out, Foul Play, Snarl, Parting Shot, Icy Wind, Taunt, Fake Tears. I probably missed something off. But like, there's so many moves it can have that you kind of need to play around. So basically, game 1, I was playing around Parting Shot, because I figured it's most likely to have Parting Shot, and then it hit me with the Fate Tears, and Kyogre deleted me. But then, yeah, games 2 and 3, I can't remember exactly what I did to change up. But like, Palkia's got a super good matchup into Kyogre. Dialga is a bit of a problem occasionally, but I mean, between Palkia Max Quakes, like Palkia almost will outspeed pretty much every Dialga. So between Palkia Max Quakes, Eerie Impulse on P2, like it's not an unwinnable matchup by any means. I've got Max Quake on Calyrex or just Horsepower. Amoonguss can put it to sleep and it doesn't one-shot. So there are ways around that. Rest of the team kind of just folds to Palkia a little bit. I can't remember exactly how that set went, but I ended up winning in game 3. I think I largely fixated on the Persian in that set because it was the most interesting Pokemon and also kind of the most scary just because of the uncertainty factor. Round 2 I played against Stefan Mott, who you all may know as Pengy. He's a fairly prominent VGC player. Yeah, Pengy's his Twitter handle, you may have seen him around. This set, I will be honest, not necessarily sure I deserved it, but so it goes sometimes. Lost game 1, what did I do in game 1? I'll tell you what game 1 was. No, did I win game 1 against Stefan? I think I won game 1 against Stefan. I might be wrong there, sorry. I think what am I saying? Yeah, I think I won game 1 against Stefan rather than losing. I remember turn 1 I think he was trying to bait me into maxing Palkia, and he had Eerie Impulse on his Zapdos, and I didn't. I just set Trick Room, and then kind of won from there. Did I? Or was that game 2? No, that was game 1. I don't know. Either way, it went to a game 3. And in game 3, I got Aaron Trailered. For those of you who don't know, Aaron Trailer, there was at this point, pretty infamous play he made at the Salt Lake City Regionals, weekend before Liverpool, where he ended up Dynamaxing his Whimsicott specifically to get up Misty Terrain so that Amoonguss couldn't spore him. And that happened with Grimmsnarl in game 3. I got greedy. Stefan led Grimmsnarl, Kyogre into Palkia Amoonguss, and I could have just pressed Follow Me Rage Powder Trick Room, and that would have kind of almost instantly won me the game. It also would have played around a potential like Thunder Wave or something. Like Kyogre doesn't really want to stay in there, so I could have maybe made a read on that. Instead, I went straight for a Spore, because I was greedy. And so my opponent Dynamaxed their Grimmsnarl, one-shot my Palkia, and then blocked my Spore. From that point, I was in an awful position, and I got out of jail for free, because at one point my -2 attack Calyrex, because it'd been pivoting in and out, my -2 attack Calyrex crit his Zacian with a Max Quake, and just killed it from full. And then there was some other, like, very unlucky stuff on his front. Like, his Incineroar at one point flare blitzed my Amoonguss, and it was never going to kill either way. He just wanted a bit of chip, but then he crit my Amoonguss, but that ended up being bad for him because he took extra recoil, and that put him in range of my high horsepower. And then I had Trick Room up, and he tried to side T-Wave his Kyogre. I don't know if it necessarily would have made him slower than my Calyrex, but he did it to try and block a Spore from my Amoonguss. And then he missed his own T-Wave on his Kyogre, and I spored it. Like, apart from the Zacian crit, I don't know if anything individually would have immediately turned the game in his favour, but at the same time, like, just the kind of culmination of all of them was very unfortunate. Well, I don't feel that bad, because he ended up going 7-1 and cutting. I was the only person who beat him on day 1. So clearly he is unstoppable if he's not hacked. Round 3 against Jamie was an interesting one, because his team is kind of wild. I don't know why he's running Necrozma Dustnet main over just like Solgaleo. But basically, game 1, I got Omega Trailered. He hit me with the biggest Aaron Trailer move I've ever seen in my life, because it turns out his Whimsicott is Life Orb, and it's running, I think it was, Tailwind Energy Ball, Moonblast Hurricane. And so turn 1, again, I led Amoonguss and Palkia into this. And And what happened on turn 1 was he Dynamaxed his Whimsicott and just killed my Palkia with Life Orb Moonblast. And I ended up losing the game from there because I just had nothing. He killed my Palkia turn 1. Sorry. And yeah, I had nothing to go off of. Games 2 and 3, I elected to not go for that lead. I can't actually remember what I went for precisely. I think it was like... I think I may have gone Palkia Alecki actually into this. No, I definitely went Palkia Alecki because I remember slowing down the Necrozma. But basically, games 2 and 3, I cleared through his lead and then just pivoted off his Necrozma forever with Incin. And it was physical Necrozma. That was a big thing. He revealed Sunsteel Strike in game 1, so I knew that his Necrozma was physical, which meant that Incin just like almost auto wins that matchup. Because like even though it's got a weakness policy, you can put it at -4, proc its weakness policy. Oh no, it's still at -2. I don't care. So I ended up winning that one just because I blast through his early game with Palkia, and then I just kind of didn't let his Necrozma do anything. Just use Solgaleo. That's my genuine advice to anyone who's thinking about using Necrozma Duskmane. Just use Solgaleo. He told me after the game that like, oh, Necrozma's bulkier, so you get more chances to hit things, but like it doesn't matter because you're doing like half as much damage. It's rubbish. Yeah, that's how that one went. I lost game 1 to Giant Surprise Factor, and then won the next 2, because Necrozma sucks. Round 4 against Pool Spirit, who is... Actually, if anyone's been following my AML content, he's a member of my AML team. So that was kind of fun. This one, we kind of traded blows early on. I will say I was terrified of his Dragapult for the entire game. And, like, he's probably scared to bring Dragapult into my team because, like, Calyrex destroys it. Palkia one-shots it, and I've got Redirection into Moongus. It can't really hit P2. But yeah, basically, I was terrified of this Dragapult, but his Dragapult was also terrified of me. But at the same time, I kind of had to play around a possible Dragapult lead, which made this matchup very awkward. Again, I can't remember exactly how the first couple of games went. Game 1, I didn't want to lead Incin. Like, against this, like, knowing what all the sets are now, Incin Palkia is a good lead into anything that isn't named Dragapult. I actually don't know if his Dragapult... Oops, I didn't mean to click on that. Fuck. Oops, apologies. I don't know if his Dragapult actually had... Oh, for God's sake. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. I don't know if his Dragapult actually had a Dragon move. I think it was like... It was like Helping Hand Protect, Fly, Phantom Force, I think. So yeah, like, again, if I know the sets, that becomes very safe to lead like Incin Palkia into, but I was worried about that having a Dragon move. I was worried about Thundy being Defiant, which meant game 1 was a little bit awkward. It turns out his Thundy was Prankster, so I had to end up playing around that, which is kind of difficult with my team, because, I mean, Taunt and Eerie Impulse between the two of them do a lot to my squad. The only thing that really stops that is Calyrex, this guy here, and Calyrex gets bullied by Incin and Zacian, and also doesn't like Ghost moves. So it's kind of a weird one. We ended up trading blows. Game 3, what did I end up leading? I think I did end up leading Incin Palkia in Game 3, and he led Zacian, and I can't remember what the other Pokemon was, but the super, super obvious play I had was just to fake out Zacian and Quake it, and just delete it off the field immediately. But I think I ended up hard focusing... Oh, I think did he lead Rillaboom? He may have led Rillaboom. Or Incin. No, I think he led Incin. But basically, instead, because my Incin was faster, I could have just gone fake out into Zacian and blast it. But I figured he would protect, because that play is super obvious, and then he ended up not protecting. And just play roughing my Palkia. And I did Dynamax, so I didn't immediately die, but taking that much damage on my Dynamax turn 1 ended up putting me in a really, really bad position. So that was basically just an absolutely massive read from Paul. If he gets that wrong, I think he loses the game instantaneously. So, you know, I just got called out, basically, in that game. I maybe could have played a bit safer. Like, sometimes it is worth just keeping your opponent honest, which maybe I should have done, but I tried to get too greedy for positioning, and I got punished for it. was how I lost that one. So that put me at 3-1. This next game was my first game against Sun. This one was very funny because turn 1 in game 1, I basically just I can't remember exactly what it was. I think my opponent led like Zardzation or something like that. Or like, what was it? Zard Grim? I can't remember. But basically, either way, turn 1, he switched his Charizard into Groudon. Groudon wasn't Assault Vest. Turns out I worm-winded that slot instead of geysering it, because why would I geyser it? Or like Quaking the Zacian, for example. And I just one-shot his Groudon. It was a crit. I'm pretty sure the crit didn't actually... well, the crit may have mattered in terms of the KO, but even if I don't KO, I'm then in a very good position because he's got a Zacian, because his Zacian protected turn 1, his Zacian's been intimidated, and then also has taken a drop from Max Wormwind, and is dead to a Quake, so they kind of have to switch it, and their Groudon's not really doing anything if they stay in with it. Instead, I crit it and got the one shot, and my opponent ended up writing that down on it, like on his notes. I remember distinctly he wrote down crit. I ended up winning that game, basically. That's just snowballed that lead. Game 2... what happened in Game 2? I don't remember. Something happened in Game 2. Game 3, again, at one point I crit him, but it was... like, he did have light screen up, but it was against a Gastrodon that was at, like, 20%. Like, that thing is cooked by a Max Quake. It's not living that, ever. But I crit, and it killed him. And he wrote that one down as well. And I ended up winning the set, and... as, like, once it got to the point where the set was pretty much wrapped up, like, I'd had a guaranteed win condition, I distinctly remember him circling both of the crits that he had written down on his card and looking really salty. And I was just sat there thinking, like, I don't think either of them mattered. I don't know. That was a weird, funny interaction, but there you go. Round 6, Lee Watson. This was a very strange one. You see Charizard and you think maybe it's like an anti-sun measure or whatever. No, it's Scarf Bulldoze to start off his Solgaleo's weakness policy. Which I think I gauged pretty early on in game 1. Like, he literally went for Bulldoze Max Solga turn 1 of that game. I ended up stalling it out. I got Trick Room up, I got my Calyrex in, I killed their Solgaleo, and then I just Glacial Lanced everything to death, because Glacial Lance kind of destroys that entire team. And then game 2... oh, yeah, also the Solgaleo had Wide Guard, which he tried to catch me out with a couple of times, but fortunately I just pressed horsepower most of the time when necessary. Yeah, I don't know how much more there is to say about that one. Once I figured out it was Scarf Charizard and all that, I think that matchup was relatively smooth sailing. I'm trying to think, what was the... what was game 2 in that one? I don't remember. I just remember Lucky doing a whole bunch of work in that game. Then, okay, round 7 I got penned to Eric Rios, who, for anyone who doesn't know, ended up winning the entire tournament. So, bad draw for me. But, like, I did lose 2-0, but it was kind of closer than anticipated. Game 1... this wasn't like a mega... it's not like a if I hit this I definitely win kind of thing. But on turn 1 I missed a Spatial Rend on his Gastro. And Gastro is a big threat. So if you look back at what my team does, like Gastro stops water moves from this guy, which I want to press a lot into Sun. Because, I mean, look at this. Weak to water, weak to water, weak to water. I want to reset Sun. Gastro's a problem. It's slower than Calyrex, so it can yawn it in Trick Room. Same goes for P2. It's okay into Amoonguss is okay into it, but obviously Regieleki can't hit it. It does well into Incin, so like that's kind of threat number 1, and getting 50% on that on turn 1 is huge. And for the rest of that game, Gastron ended up sitting at around kind of 40-50% health. So it's a kind of like, it would have made the game a lot easier. I don't know if I necessarily would have won, but it would have made the game a lot easier if I'd hit that on turn 1. I missed so many spatial runs that day. Like most of them didn't matter, honestly. That one maybe did, but this PALKIA misses 95% accurate moves more than it should do. It's kind of annoying. Yeah, if we go back to... where's Eric's team? Yeah, and then game 2... game 2 was a really good game, actually. There was a lot of, like... there was a lot of kind of just pivoting around, setting up Trick Room, him stalling out Trick Room, me figuring out that I didn't want to set Trick Room because Gastro, that kind of stuff. And it eventually culminated into a board position where he had Charizard Grimmsnarl on the field with a Zacian in the back. All of them are in range of Glacial Lance. I I have my Calyrex on the field at like 5 HP or something stupid. Like, it's dead to a hit, basically. My Palkia is about half. I've got my instant in the back. And at this point, it's basically a call. Because even with Intimidate, if they double into my Palkia, I think their Zarba's at like -1. But their Grimmsnarl's at neutral. Even if I switch in Incin to Intimidate, I think I don't die to the Grimmsnarl, but then I'm dead to the Charizard. So if they double into that slot, I'm then in a horrible position because I've got Instant Calyrex, but then they can just double into my Calyrex and kill it, and I can't set Trick Room and I lose to Zacian. However, if he goes for Blast Burn into Calyrex and kills Calyrex, no, sorry, what am I saying? Yeah, the other option is I stay in and go for Trick Room with Palkia. Switch into Instant and go for Trick Room with Palkia. Which means that if they don't double into Palkia, I'll live a what's it called? Spirit Break. And then I set up Trick Room and Calyrex sweeps. And basically, I thought he'd read into the Instant switch and double into Palkia. He did not. He hit my Instant slot. He hit my Calyrex slot, which kills the Calyrex. And then I think I did actually end up getting Trick Room up anyway. So in hindsight, I think I probably could have just dead safely switched in the Instant and I might have lived with Palkia anyway if they'd doubled into it. So maybe that was the guaranteed play. But yeah, either way, he didn't double into my Palkia. He hit my Calyrex. I read that he wouldn't. My Calyrex went down and then I lost. So yeah, so it goes. It was a close set. He did tweet out after the set though. I can't remember what it was. It was like, I think he went, I'm 6-1. My round 7 opponent played really well. I was like, okay, we'll take that. I lost, but I got a recommendation from Eric Rios, so we'll take it. Yeah, he ended up winning the whole thing. Was that a lot of Kyogre, yet Sun still won. Yeah, weirdly the Sun matchup, this Sun team actually does well, like quite well into Kyogre. Because like with the Assault Vest Groudon, you're not actually that scared of water moves, and this team is taken to running Assault Vest Groudon the majority of the time now. Especially when Gastron's there. Like Gastron is such a weapon into that team. And the one foil that some teams normally have for Gastron is Kartana, but there's so much fire on this team. Like Groudon, this team runs a fire move. Normally runs either Heat Crash or Fire Punch. Instant obviously runs Flare Blitz. Charizard runs ginormous fire move. You're dead. And so with and Zacian outspeeds it and kills it with Sacred Sword as well. So like the one foil to Gastro is threatened really hard by like everything else on the team basically. And Kyogre when it's not in rain, because there's a lot of bulk on this team. Like I said, Groudon's Assault Vest, so I think it takes under half from Spout in Sun. I could be wrong on that, but I think it does. Like Zacian's not threatened by Spout in Sun. Instant is a little bit, but like you can get away with it. Zard outspeeds Kyogre and just blasts it if Sun's up. Gastrodon obviously doesn't care about Kyogre at all. Like, it's weirdly, the matchup is kind of even at worst for the Sun team, I think. That's not to say that, like, it's unwinnable for the Rain matchup. Like, there was a lot of Rain in top 8. Actually, let me see if I can just quickly bring up the top 8. Victory. I'm sorry, my screen looks very weird. Victory Road, alright, here you go. Liverpool. Okay, oops, let me just... Hold on, so where's the top 8? Yeah. Oh, you can't see that. Okay. I've done this very badly. So yeah, so we see this is number 1, number 2, Rain, then there's some stuff, and then Rain. So yeah, there's three Rain teams in top 8, and then as you scroll down, there's a bunch of... Oh, there's me. This one's me. This team here is me. There's a bunch of Rain going on here. Rain. So like it's not unwinnable, but like it's kind of a difficult matchup for Rain, weirdly. You've seen a Rain team with a Rillaboom that's played well. Well, yes and no, because again, Rillaboom has the same issue as Kartana, where it'll beat the Gastrodon, but it gets destroyed by the rest of the team. Like, it can't do jack. Like, okay, you can high horsepower, but that's, let's be honest, that's not actually doing anything to Zacian. It can hit Groudon with grass moves, but Groudon can OHKO with a fire move. Incin it hates. Zard it definitely hates. Like it's big toast into this team. Like I think Kartana is the best grass type into this team, and even then the matchup is not actually that great. So it's kind of tricky. Like it's not as easy as just have Rain run grass type. The thing with this particular Sun team, with this 6, is that there are no like hard counters anywhere. Like of all the big meta teams at the moment, there's nothing that this has a negative matchup against. At worst, it's even. Like worst case, it's just play better. Which is why it's so scary. Which is why it's won 2 regionals. Because at that level where you're playing against like that many people in a row and 1 loss can almost knock you out of the tournament straight away. I mean, obviously you can go 7-1 and cut and stuff, but like the majority of 6-2s aren't cutting. 1 or 2 losses will just ditch you out. And once you get to top cut, obviously 1 loss will drop you out. It's not like laddering where you can have one bad match. Like you can have a matchup that you automatically lose, but you can still climb to the top of the ladder because you can just avoid that matchup. Or you can just lose to it once and then win 3 more, right? But this team is so good because it has so few, if any, at all, like negative matchups. Hello, Uncle. Like that's what makes this team so difficult, and like it does look. Sometimes it does look as easy as just play Rain. Don't give me that Weezing Kyogre. Like, okay, in theory, Weezing Kyogre does actually do decently into this team, right? But then you're running Weezing Kyogre. Like, okay, I should more specifically say there is nothing that has been discovered so far that has a positive matchup into this team, or a better than even matchup into this team, that doesn't leave a massive hole somewhere else, right? Like the kind of Weezing Kyogre teams are like a hard counter of this one team, and that's great if everyone else at that regional you're playing at is running this exact 6. But then you run into something else, and you know, like if you look at the rest of these teams, like opposing Rain probably beats that because you're sacrificing valuable slots for a Weezing. Dialga would destroy that. Oh my god. Like Kali Ice Palkia would do pretty well. Like you leave holes in your team to other stuff. Weezing Palkia. No, stop. Don't run Weezing. Don't run Weezing. Don't run Weezing. Just don't run Weezing. It's bad. Weezing sucks. Like again, you can run Weezing to hard counter this Sun team, but it's bad into everything else. Weezing sucks. It gets one shot by like half the format, at least. Its bulk is really not that good in a format that's so full of like enormous special attackers. Yeah, it wouldn't make it past Swiss, is the thing. Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, in a tournament setting like this, that's played out over 2-3 days, you can't afford to have any glaring holes. SSC matched a dodgy Evolvization team that had pretty good matchup against it. Does Evolvization match up well into this? I could kind of see it. I guess Zacian gives that a bit of trouble. That's just Ground to an extent. That's just Grimmsnarl. Yeah, well, I guess the rest of the team's also there, but even then, like, that's an even matchup at worst. Like, this 6 is very optimized. The downside of this 6 is it's so inflexible. Like, I don't think there's anything in this 6 that you could replace for anything else and not have it be rubbish. The one thing is maybe you could switch out Grimmsnarl for, like, Prankster Thundurus or something, but then you lose a bit of strength into the Trick Room matchup. Yeah, it's a tricky one. Like, I don't think there's anything on this team that's really replaceable. And honestly, a lot of the sets, like, you can play around a bit with the sets, but, like, some of them are pretty set. Like, you need it to be Screen Scrimstyle. If anyone tells you Iron Ball, just don't listen. They pretty much all run lefties Gastro. I mean, Incin, you can mess around with the item a bit, but, like, Groudon kind of really wants to be Assault Vest on this team just to tank hits from Kyogre, because you want to be winning the Weather Ball, right? So it's quite inflexible. Life of Veltal, Evolvization, Lando, Incin, and Mungus, Regilucky. Yeah, I guess turning up a Veltal does a lot of Evolvization done. Yeah, I will say Life with Veltal seeing an uptick is terrifying. That thing is so scary. It does an unreasonable amount of damage. We kind of glanced at it earlier, but that's part of the reason I wanted to run P2 over Dusclops, because I've been testing a lot of Dusclops. I tested a bit of DD as well, but like P2, you can Eerie Impulse that, whereas anything else, you just lose. You just lose. Anyway, yeah, that's Sun, and the discussion on Sun. Round 6 opponent is an interesting team. Yeah, it was Scarf Bulldozard and Wide Guard, Solgaleo and stuff, but it was one of those ones where, like, I forced my opponent to use all their tricks in game 1, which I ended up winning anyway, and that meant that game 2, it lost the surprise factor. And game 2 wasn't quite as close, I don't think. I think I just made a read on... Oh, I'll tell you what it was in game 2. I remember now. I forgot earlier, I remember now. He led Amoonguss Kyogre, and I led Palkia Aleki, and he I think he was scared of me doubling into his Kyogre and just killing it. And so he went for, like... I think he went... Spore? Rage Powder? Something. He went for something with Amoonguss. Oh, we never found out. He went for something with Amoonguss and switched out his Kyogre, and I ended up just going T-Bolt and Max Whirlwind into his Amoonguss and killing it turn 1. Yeah, I have ways of getting around Amoonguss. I have other stuff on the team. Like, Earring Impulse P2 covers a lot of matchups well. You have to play carefully around Amoonguss. I went over this earlier. Again, that's the downside of the team, is that it requires a lot of very careful positioning, and Amoonguss is a problem, which is why I have countermeasures. Yeah, anyway. Round 8. Against this guy Morris, who I had actually been making friends with all day, because I don't know if anyone knows KZ VGC. If anyone doesn't, go check him out. Good VGC streamer. I've done some casting with him and stuff. Good fun. We like him. But he turned up with a couple of his friends from Germany, one of them being Morris, and I've been chatting with them all day. He was running also Calyrex PALKIA, as you can see. Like, the whole day we'd been kind of chatting about different matchups, that kind of stuff. You know, making friends, and then we get paired in round 8 in a Calyrex PALKIA mirror, and it was disgusting. It's the most stressful set of Pokemon I played all day. This mirror match is so intense, because both players are constantly trying to figure out how to position and stuff, like, and he ended up, I had a bit of a fade game 1, and forgot that Indeedee are often running Safeguard now, so I led Amoonguss and got Safeguarded on. Like, my initial plan was, because I think they led Indeedee Palkia, like, my initial plan was Spore, I mean, I was planning to Spore the Palkia, but if they redirect it, Spore the Indeedee, set up Trick Room, Spore the other slot the next turn, go nuts. The problem is they set up Safeguard, I set up Trick Room, and my Amoonguss was useless. And then my Palkia was faster than their Palkia, and so I was in a horrible position. And then their Amoonguss just kind of did a number on me. So the next couple of games, I ended up first defeat Calyrex with. That's just not even true. Palkia is by far the bigger threat in this matchup. Palkia rips this team in half. Cali Ice, you can just pivot around with Instant. That's fine. You can't safely set up Trick Room against it because Spore from Amoonguss, assuming Safeguard isn't up. That's not true. It's more of a Palkia wall than anything else. But basically, like, game 2 and 3, I ended up very deliberately not setting Trick Room so that I couldn't make use of my Amoonguss. So Trick Room ended up being net detrimental to me. And so I was constantly trying to play around his Amoonguss and not setting up Trick Room so that my late game Calyrex didn't just get immediately spored. And so there was just so much, like, repositioning. I think I ended up bringing very different Pokemon as well. What was it I brought against this? I think it was game 1, it was like Amoonguss, Palkia, Calyrex, and Incin. And then I think I completely switched that up and ended up going... actually, I didn't switch it up that completely, but I ended up going, like, P2 Incin, Palkia, Calyrex, or something like that. Basically, I dropped the Amoonguss and brought P2, and P2 ended up being so clutch. It ended up being so unbelievably clutch. Palkia doesn't hate Glacial Lances, just because, like, you can go first, Max Whirlwind. There's no Dragon Resists on this team, on either, but, like, on his version either, there's no Dragon Resists. So, like, if Trick Room's not up, then you can just Whirlwind it, and Glacial Lance isn't doing that much to a Max Palkia. You have Incin on both sides, and yes, the team does have safety goggles. Incin is safety goggles to, honestly, almost entirely to get around Amoonguss. Yeah, so I ended up not bringing Trick Room games 2 and 3 and just playing for a Calyrex endgame, but I ended up in game 3, it ended up being a literal coin toss. Like, it was a 50-50 for me to win or lose, because it was in a position where he had managed to get Trick Room up, and his Amoonguss had put a bunch of my stuff to sleep, and I was in a weird spot, but it ended up being, like, I mean, I got a bit unfortunate on previous turns because my Pokemon hadn't woken up previously, so like it wasn't strict, like a few turns ago it wasn't a 50-50. Like the odds were in my favour at the start of this sequence. But this sequence ended with my Porygon 2 outside of Trick Room. Yeah, so it was P2 outside of TR, facing down their Calyrex that was at +2 because their weakness policy had gone off. And my P2 had 2 turns of sleep. And it literally came down to, if P2 wakes up, I foul play the Calyrex, it dies. If my P2 does not wake up, I get Glacial Lance and I die. And then P2 hit it with Stonks. If anyone has Stonks, now is the right time to put them in chat. That's why I have the Stonks emote. So, I mean, that's just the game we play. Basically, like, go for the end of that set I really enjoyed, because, like, before we even clicked, like, we both knew what moves we were clicking. There was nothing either of us could do about it. Like, before the final turn even happened, we both went, like, right, either way, GG's, fist bumped, and then pressed our moves. Which I thought was quite funny, but, God, that was a stressful set. Yeah, there were some big difference makers in the mirror match. Namely, like, Indeedee was a pain in the arse, but you can just... Thank you for Stonks, Encore. There you go, there's Stonks. Indeedee is a pain in the arse, but you can just kind of blast through it with Palkia, or, like, Glacial Lances or whatever. So it's not that difficult. The other key differences are, my Palkia was faster than his Palkia. That ended up being huge, because again, in games 2 and 3, I was playing very deliberately to not have TR up, so that my Palkia could outspeed and KO his Palkia at the right time. I had P2, which again was a huge thing into Palkia. Like, Foul Play P2 does super well into Palkia, does pretty well into Weakness Policy Calyrex, does well into Regieleki. Indeedee's kind of a problem for it. Hey Connor, Pointeeks. You mistyped it as well. You put an X rather than a Z. Come on, if you're going to be dumb, at least do it properly. Jesus. Yeah, like, the key differences were I was faster with Palkia and I had P2. Like, that was pretty much it. And then also I played well, but yeah, someone just posted in chat, don't let Buenti get to Game 3, which is a bit of a meme. I don't know if anyone follows Smash, and you know the legends of Game 4 MK Leo. Oh, hello as well, Damien. But yeah, Game 3 Buenti is a beast. Over the course of the... So I went 6-2 over the course of this tournament, and I won Game 2 a total of twice. We see here. Won Game 1 a total of twice. So here we won Game 1, here we won Game 1. Every other set I lost Game 1. And, okay, I did lose 2 of them, but, like, my win rate from 1-0 down is 4-1. Or 4-2, sorry. So, like, from 1-0 down, I'm still statistically more likely to win. So the meme goes, don't let Buenti get to Game 3. Like, unironically, I think if I'd made that one turn correctly against Eric and got to Game 3... I've got a lot of info on his team. I genuinely think I could have taken that. I didn't. So he made the right call in Game 2 and beat me. So it's a completely moot point, and there's no point in me going like, oh, I would have beaten Eric Wheels. But you don't let Buenti get to Game 3. It's not that I'm bad at Game 1. It's that I'm using Game 1 differently, right? And I kind of brushed on this earlier. But with a team like this that's so... yeah, okay, good flex. Zoni, you have a flow chart, good job. With a team like this that's so flexible, getting information from your opponent is such a huge boon. Like, in Game 2? Must be Game 2, of my first round. Like, this matchup's a little bit shaky, because if it's minimum speed of Moongus that my opponent has, I don't want to set up Trick Room, because Calyrex just destroys it outside of TR, but if it's not min speed of Moongus, it will outspeed my Calyrex. And so Game 2 in this game, I had the end game completely sealed up, right? It was dead set, but I deliberately took longer to close out the end game. It was still guaranteed, I didn't risk the game or anything, but I deliberately took longer to close out the end game in order to get that information. Like, it's not that I'm bad at Game 1, it's that for a team like this that doesn't have flowcharts into matchups, like I said, I didn't bring the same 4 Pokemon to all 3 games in any of these matchups. Like, I think a couple of the 2-game sets, I think I brought the same Pokemon to both games, but the rest of them, I didn't bring the same for the whole set in any of these sets. So it's not a case of, like, I'm bad at Game 1. It's a case of Game 1 is very useful for scouting on a team like this. Whereas on something like Swordfish, Game 1, you have the advantage of I can just press these buttons and my opponent has to figure out what my sets are, or they lose. So it's an interesting one. I think it can be a tough team to play at times. I think overall it's a very strong team. I don't know if it's necessarily worth the vast amount of hype that people seem to have placed on it recently. There's been so much stuff going into this region of like, oh my god, Kali Ice PALKIA is the new meta, and oh my god, it's going to be everything. Like, no. It's not world-beating. There were 3 of them in top 38, and one of them was 5-3. Top 32, and one of them was 5-3, right? I was the highest placing at 11th. So it's not like a world-beating team, but it is good. And I think if people can get the hang of playing the team, like I practiced this team so much in the run-up to this, and I still didn't have flowcharts against a lot of matchups, because it's just a difficult team to flowchart with. But I think overall, if you're confident in your ability to play best of 3, and you're confident in your ability to play adaptably with a team with a lot of options, I think it's a really strong team. And I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is that I have done differently on my team, but I have built a few of these sets very differently to what I see the standard sets being built as. The opinion was not that. I saw so much talk about Kali Ice PALKIA being a threat going into Liverpool. Also, the people who said it completely died after SLC overreacting in the other direction. Like, it got second at Brisbane, and I know that was before the Sun thing came up. But this team has it has an even matchup into Sun, I'd say. So like, it didn't place incredibly at SLC, but like that doesn't mean it's dead. Anyway, I have a couple of things on this team that I run differently to other people, like sets I build slightly differently and stuff like that. And I genuinely think that makes the team so much stronger, and I don't know why anyone else isn't doing them, and I'm not going to reveal them yet because I want to keep them free UIC and potentially further on. Again, reason I'm not reusing the paste. I think this team can still be tweaked and optimized, but I think the 6 here that I used is the best we have at the moment, and I personally think, and obviously everyone's going to say this about their own team, otherwise they would be using it, I personally think that like the sets I'm running, or at least the general theme of the sets I'm running, are better than other variants that I've seen. I think it gives you more options into certain matchups that people aren't utilising as well as they could do. So if ever I do a team report on this, which I will do at some point, I'm sure, be it after UIC or after Worlds, I don't know, I'll do a team report at some point. But yeah, basically, I think this team is very good. I think it can be difficult to pilot. I think you need to be confident in your ability to play best of 3 to use it. But I think it is very, very strong, and I think I'm not going to say it's underrated, because a lot of people were yelling about it being the next big thing, but I also can't call it overrated because there were people who were saying it had died. It's good, basically, I think. I think this is the best 6. I think it's good. You can play around with other variants. I personally don't think they're as good though. Like, I think I kind of mentioned this earlier. Indeed, he's too passive. Dust Lobs, you die to Ghost and Dark types. You can run variants without Regieleki, but then you don't have a fast mode. Like, it's I don't know. Either way, all in all, I feel like I've been rambling for ages. This recording has ended up being a lot longer than I expected it to be. So, if anyone is watching this on YouTube and has gotten this far, then good job. And or you have me on in the background, which is also fine. I love the view retention. Yeah, overall, solid team. I'm very glad that I put a lot of practice in going into this regional. I'm really happy with how I ended up playing as well. I lost a couple of games off of effectively my opponents just making good calls. And I could have maybe played better earlier in the sets. Earlier in the set against Paul. Maybe I shouldn't have dropped game 1. Maybe I could have played better around that in game 3. It's a learning process. I got punished a couple of times for trying to be too aggressive with the Moongus when I could have had safer options with Rage Powders. And again, the Eric set came down to in 45 seconds. I think in hindsight, I had a play that could have almost certainly won it in the absence of crits or whatever. But in 45 seconds, it's hard to consider that. So there's a learning experience, and this was my first ever live event. I've obviously played best of 3 events before. Like, it's not brand new, and it's not like playing live is that different for Pokemon. It's not like something like a Smash Bros where there's a lot of like audience hype going on behind you. But yeah, I'm super happy with how it went. Like 6-2 is a really solid result. I got 11th. That's 80 CP. I was kind of hoping for top 8, but I got pretty close. So I'm feeling good for EUIC. Like I said, I may well play the same team. If I do, obviously I'm not going to release the paste. But yeah, that is about it. That's a recap of my my Liverpool run. I don't know how to close this video out, but yeah, thank you all for watching as always. If you have not done so already, please do sub to the channel. You're welcome to sub on Twitch as well if you're watching this live, or follow, either works. And if you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like as well. Yeah, that's going to be all from me for this time. Thank you for bearing with me as I rambled for 50 minutes, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.